Hi, I'm Maddie Harvey. I'm a knitwear designer and knitting teacher who loves helping knitters develop their creativity and their confidence. This video tutorial to show you how to work a 3-needle bind off or cast off. I hope you find it useful. Please remember to like the video and also to subscribe to my channel because every Thursday I post new video tutorials and tips and tricks. Enjoy. Bye. So for today's video tutorial, I wanted to show you how to work a 3-needle bind off or cast off. I love to use this technique in a lot of my shawl patterns. So this is my Winter Lights shawl, and you can see I've used a 3-needle cast off here, and I've made a real feature of it by working it in the contrast yarn. But it can also be used to make a nice seam, maybe to join together a shoulder seam of a jumper, and it also looks quite different if you work it in the same colour yarn as the rest of the piece of work. So this is my Feshy shawl, and I've used a 3-needle bind off or cast off here in the middle to join the two halves together, and it's obviously it's done in the same colour of yarn, so it's less of a feature, but you still get this nice ridge down the middle, and on the other side you get a kind of stocking stitch seam there. So it's quite a good one to know how to do. So I have worked up 2 little pieces of knitting here. I'm using pretty chunky yarn, and these are 8mm needles. So I've got 2 sides here, and I'm going to join them together with wrong sides together, which is how these shawls are joined together, but you have to sort of do it how your instructions say. If they want your 3-needle bind off not to have that sort of ridge, then it might be asking you to do it right sides together, so that the ridge of the 3-needle bind off is on the inside of your work. But we're going to do it the other way, as if we were making a feature of it. And I'm going to use a different colour yarn to actually work the cast off so that you can see it more easily. But again, whatever your pattern says. The other thing that might be slightly different is I've cut my working yarn off here, but your pattern might say to keep that not cut it off, so that you can use that yarn to work the bind off. So you just have to see what your pattern says. Okay, so what we're doing is we're joining these 2 pieces of knitting together whilst also casting off. So you need to keep these 2 needles together, so holding them together and holding them quite close together, but you do need to sometimes make a little bit of space, and I'll show you why in a moment. So I've got my work on, these are both 8mm needles, they're obviously not a pair, and I'm using a third one to actually do the cast off, but you could use a double pointed needle, something like that. And it's quite often a good idea to use a needle that's a size larger than the ones you've got your stitches on here, just because casting off does tend to be a bit tighter, and this will help loosen it up if you use a bigger needle. So I just put my needle tip in to these 2 stitches as if I was knitting 2 together, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm just putting it through the top, the front of both of those stitches, and I'm going to knit them together. So just make sure that you're pulling that loop through both the front and the back, and then just take this slowly because it's easy for other stitches to fall off the needle. Take those 2 stitches off, and I've got 1 stitch on my right hand needle. Now this is where it's easy for a stitch to come off, so just move these up carefully, and then it's handy here to make a little bit of a space between the needles, maybe with your forefinger, because if they're too close together it's quite hard to see what's happening, and make sure that you've gone through both stitches. So just make a little bit of space, put your needle through the next 2 from each of your left hand needles, wrap your yarn round and pull through a stitch and take them off, and then you're going to do sort of traditional cast off or bind off and lift this bottom stitch over the top one and off. And what I like to do is just put my index finger right through the middle of those 2 left hand needles and just sort of manipulate that front one with my forefinger and thumb to lift the bottom stitch over the top one and off, and that is a little bit loose because it's just the first one. Okay, and then knit the next two together, just being careful when they come off that I'm only taking one stitch off and these next ones aren't falling off. And then again, just using the front needle of the two left ones, lift that bottom stitch over and off, and just take your time, because it is quite easy to accidentally not catch one of these two stitches when you're knitting them together, and then lift that bottom one over the top one and off. So you just keep working along. Another thing you could do is, if you're casting off a lot of stitches like this, is you could put a marker in your two pieces of work, say, you know, like 50 stitches along or 30 stitches along or something like that, just to make sure that it's all matching up, because what you don't want to happen is you don't want to get to the end and realize you've got, like I've got 5 stitches here, and let's say I had 6 on the back, because that means somewhere along here I've missed one of the light grey stitches, or no, sorry, other way around, I've missed one of the dark grey stitches, and you don't want to have a drop stitch, obviously. So it is a good idea to place markers along your two pieces of work, you know, a lockable stitch marker that you could put on the needle, maybe every sort of 20, 30, 40, whatever, however many stitches, and that will keep you right as to whether you've missed one, or maybe you've knitted 3 together by mistake. That's a good way to keep track. So we'll just keep going along here, and I'll show you what to do at the end. So as I say, it does make quite a nice feature seam if that's what you're after, when you work it this way round, but you can work it with the right sides together, and then it would all be on the inside, all this seam here. Right, I'm at my last 2 stitches, so I'll just knit them together. Okay, and then lift that one over, and then actually at the end here, what I like to do is, rather than you know, cut this off, I'll just get my scissors and then thread it through that last stitch. I find that makes like a little ear at the edge, a little bit that sticks out. What I like to do is just pull that through, and then you end up with a much neater edge. It's slightly looser, so you will need to make sure that you weave that end in really well, because it hasn't got that kind of extra security of being threaded through the last stitch, but I think it makes a bit of a neater edge. So that's the 3 needle bind off or cast off. So along one side we've got a nice line of cast off stitches, and on the other side we've got kind of like a garter stitch bump here, and on the other side you can see here it's almost like a sort of stocking stitch join, which looks quite neat, and you can imagine if this was all in one colour that would be pretty invisible. So that is how to work a 3 needle bind off. If you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you next Thursday for another tutorial. Bye!